Thank you for joining us on Connection is the Medicine. Today I welcome Lindsay Branham, an eco-psychologist, author of the book Heartwood, and psychedelic coach. Today we'll be exploring a healing crisis Lindsay faced with autoimmune disorder and her journey of healing in nature. Thank you so much for joining us on Connection is the Medicine. Lindsay, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to start with how you first discovered a connection to nature, and then I would love to explore a life-changing healing that you experienced in nature.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor. And yeah, what a fun thing to get to talk about together today. So, when did I first become connected to nature? I grew up moving almost every year, but in really beautiful places. So, the western slope of Colorado and Northern California. And while nature was very much infused into my childhood, I think there is a difference between being around nature and understanding it almost as like an extension of me until later in life, about 6 years ago, when I had what I'm kind of calling now like an eco awakening. And I say that because I think it helps differentiate the significance of it. I also don't think we wake up once, we're waking up, many, many, many times over and over. But there's a Franciscan teacher of mine, Richard Rohr, who is based in Albuquerque, and he has a phrase that has always stuck with me, and it's the earth is the first sacred text. And I always loved that, but I didn't really understand it. What does it mean to read the earth like a sacred text? I had loved reading sacred literature, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, with that kind of reverence and that sense of, ooh, we're connected into some mystery that's been beloved by people over thousands of years, informing their lives and their morality and their ethics and their relationships and their choices. But what does it mean to read the earth like a sacred text? And so I was living in Santa Fe briefly during lockdown. So this was 2020 during the early stages of the pandemic in March. And I started having my first chronic illness symptoms at the same time as I'm living in total isolation, really. And I began going on these very long wanders in the forest around Santa Fe. So there's beautiful pines and there's aspens, there's rivers. And it was in that very slow silence that the earth started to come alive to me as a sacred text. And my body started feeling like we were having conversations, not that I was just appreciating the beauty or enjoying being outside. Something else started happening. And at first, it was almost sort of scary because it felt like kind of an alteration of my understanding of reality, of consciousness, of myself, my sense of separation from others. But that split really began to dissolve, and the subject object split sort of disappeared into this sense of subjectivity flowing back and forth instead of me as a subject interacting with an object that's an other. So in that subjectivity, it's like, oh, this love can flow, this knowing can flow, this curiosity and mystery and awe and reverence. And it became very clear to me that, ooh, I am a beginner here. There is an infinite relationship that's possible with the living world. And I've only just started to taste just like the very, very start of it.
Can I ask you how you experienced that subjective experience, like within your mind-body sense complex?
Yeah. So there was one particular tree that had been felled, and it had fallen over a river outside of Santa Fe, and I would go visit this place a lot. And I remember passing it, and I would just look at it, and it was like the fallen tree was like looking at me, and I had this sense of like being seen, not just that I was the one seeing. And so I paused on one of these walks, and it's almost like time sort of froze in a way, or like disappeared, or actually like time doesn't exist. There's a linear notion of time we're kind of all stuck in. So maybe I entered like deep time or true time or something, but started feeling like I was actually being watched, and felt this pull to come closer to the felled tree. And so I approached and then felt the impulse to lay myself over the tree. And it was this huge pine that had branches sticking out in all directions. So it's actually kind of challenging to lay myself on it with like labyrinthing amongst all these branches. And then as I laid there and I'm holding the tree and the tree is holding me, it's like our bodies recognized each other. There was like this cellular recognition of like, oh, where have you been? I've been waiting for you. And then this like sense of love and unconditional love really started moving through me in a way that brought me to tears. And tears because just the gratitude of, wow, what a gift to receive something so precious from is this tree even alive? This is a dead tree, but there's aliveness here. And then also tears of grief of like, what have I been missing through walking through this world, kind of a little bit asleep.
So what kind of a door do you think that opened? Like, was it you? Was it the tree? Was it spirit? Was it nature? Like, what did you open in that experience?
Yeah, I mean, from a like animist view of seeing spirit in all things, even the stones, even the animals and the trees, and the spirit, and then great spirit that's like pervasive of all. And this is, my worldview has now been pushed even more towards animism over the last 5 years. And so if this doesn't resonate at all and you're like, what? I don't, I'm a rational, come from more of a scientific mind. This is nature doesn't necessarily have aliveness. I guess the doorway was recognizing our mutual sentience and our mutual aliveness that's residing in all things that are here.
And the lack of separation between subject and object and various objects in the field.
And there's a book that just came out by a wonderful author named Robert McFarlane. It's called Is a River Alive? And really explores a lot of this. He's focusing on rivers. But I think there's a very big grief in the West because we have forgotten that everything is alive. And so it's difficult to connect and breach that divide when we have forgotten that we're actually made of the exact same material, which is really like the dust of stars. The same elements that are in the stars are what is in our bodies, which is what is in the trees. And there's actually no difference elementally. We have different forms of intelligence, certainly, but you could argue there's not really a hierarchy there either. Look at the way the forest cares for each other with the mycelium, and no tree is left to die alone, and they're sharing sugars and they're communicating. And now science has shown that what indigenous communities have always known, that there's a deep, deep, deep wisdom and intelligence operating all the time. Recognizing the aliveness is like the first step to then, because reverence comes pretty quick after, right? Like, how would I treat a being if there's a life in there and a light in there, not something for me to exploit or take.
What do you think keeps us as a Western culture, or even a global culture, from realizing this inherent connection and relationship to nature?
Well, you can trace kind of the great forgetting, you could say, back through like the 15th century in Europe, when the industrial boom started, when Cartesian philosophy, which separated the mind and the body, became popularized through the Enlightenment period. So the mind, the hyper-rational mind, became privileged as a way of being over the body and over the spirit, and matriarchal, animist, nature-based religions that existed in Europe had been suppressed and repressed for hundreds of years. So I'm speaking from like a Eurocentric perspective right now. Obviously, the indigenous history is very different. And so then it became very easy to the stretch to let me own what is separate than me, dominate that, subject it, mold it into my benefit, became a really easy philosophical jump, which then led to imperialism and colonialism, and the plundering of the planet went forward from there. So the separation that we're feeling now, living in 2025, is really like an outgrowth of the last 600 years of philosophy and behaviors and cultural sociopolitics that have marginalized the planet and marginalized certain communities of color, depending on what body you're in. So I see all of it as very intertwined. There's like, for me, no separating. It's all intersectional. So, and oppression. Mass domination, unfortunately, I think started with that seed first, which you could even trace back to like the Garden of Eden and the story of Adam and Eve, which has been a very dominant narrative in the West. Humans are to subjugate and control nature, right? In that story. And like intuition is to be banned and is evil. The binaries and dualities are like baked into thousands of years of human history.
Before we get into maybe me asking you what kinds of things we can do to reconnect, I want to touch on something you shared with me in a meeting we had a few weeks ago, where you said you were having autoimmune issues, and that, I think if I remember correctly, you were visiting medical doctors, and they shared that they really couldn't do anything for you. And then you interfaced with nature and something beautiful happened. I'd love to hear that story of healing in more detail that you opened a few weeks back.
Yeah, so same time period as that initial tree encounters, so 2020, I started getting really, really weird and wild health breakdown symptoms. My body started feeling like it was revolting against itself, and very quickly realized something's very, very wrong here. Was in a lot of pain. My mobility was decreasing. My cognitive capabilities were even decreasing. I was convinced that I had something very obviously very wrong. I had never felt these things in my body before. And very quickly was getting test after test after test after test. Everything was coming back normal. Finally, they found an autoimmune condition, but even getting that diagnosis, which I spent like 2 years in what felt like a bardo or an underworld place. Like I had no idea what was actually wrong with me. And the search for a diagnosis it was like an impossible to avoid quest, right? Like wanting to find out the problem so then I could find out the solution and fix what was wrong.
Was this from 2020-ish to 2022, or did it start before?
No, it was that period. And there was so much grief. I mean, I have so much sympathy and compassion for all of us that have had to spend time in that place of deep fear and unknowing, being held in the hands of a medical system that is not built on a holistic view of health. And I'm not disparaging Western medicine. Obviously, there's a lot of good there. But for what is ailing us now, which includes environmental issues, which includes grief that gets processed through the body because of our, I think, and there's evidence for this, because of our split from nature. There are symptoms that come through that are not solvable by a clear box of a diagnosis and then a clear like pharmacological solution. It's rare that exists. And if you have a condition where it's like, this is the issue, this is the fix, amazing. Mine was not one of those. And I think a lot of people have experienced similarly. For example, I was having chronic migraine headaches. That was one of the symptoms I was living with. And I still have them occasionally, not nearly as bad. Chronic migraines affect billions of people around the world with immense cost burden. There is no clear understanding of the best of Western science of what the heck is even happening in the brain of a migrainer. And I know because I've gone like to the top doctors at UCLA Migraine Center, and I've read the literature, and you're offered drugs that are not built for migraine. They're for lots of other conditions, and you have to fail each class of drug to then be given the next one. Each one comes with its own set of side effects and symptoms. It becomes your full-time job trying to keep yourself alive and well. And being inside like a sterile room where people are poking and prodding me like is also not where I'm going to feel well. And I remember in one of these appointments, a doctor was like asking me about my anxiety symptoms or depression. And I just looked at her and I'm like, I'm living in the year 2020. Of course I'm anxious and depressed. What is this view of like mental health being so split from systemic factors that would be contributing to someone's wellness? I don't know. I went on like a mission of trying to help support myself. And I think it's a great act of self-love and kindness to have met myself in the depths of those places of despair. And anyone who's been there, those are some tender places that no one sees. And how we respond to our own pain and our own grief is an opportunity. But I do see my sickness as like a initiation or a transformational journey or like a rite of passage in a way. And seeing it that way isn't just to make myself feel better about it. It genuinely can be that transformational.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have that. I have family members who have had long-term psycho-emotional, physical challenges for decades, and it can be really difficult to find a way through that forest. I myself, from the time of my late 20s up until just 2 years ago in my mid-50s, I experienced cluster headaches almost every year for 2 to 3 months that were extremely profound, that there was not even a pain medication that could work with them. So a question arose within me is, did you explore other healing modalities in your pursuit of finding healing?
Oh, yeah. I explored really everything. It's not just, oh, I believe in this psychological, emotional relationship with the body. Emotions are embodied experiences. So there's no separating those things. And from a psychological perspective or looking at the science and studies, it's very clear that what moves through us energetically that affects our experience of pain, our experience of sensation, can have roots in the emotional body that lives within us. So I'm kind of blending like Western language and like Eastern language here, but it's not a stretch to make these statements is what I mean. There was a theorist named William James in the 1800s who's kind of credited with being the architect of emotional theories of emotion. And he was really the first one who said emotions are essentially just experiences of the body. There's no separating those things. So when we're talking about someone maybe having, I did, I mean, I spent my 20s and most of my 30s as a documentary filmmaker in areas of violent conflict around the world. I could theorize that part of what I was experiencing in my body could have been that coming through in some way. I, have my own experience in my childhood growing up. It could be that partially as well. And I think all of those paths are ones I went down. So I pursued somatic experiencing therapy, trauma therapy, EMDR, and all of it is part of like the basket of medicine and in the like healer's medicine kit, I can't say which did what exactly, but I know it all is important. I started my sickness journey as a very mental person and had spent a lot of my life in the mind. And through my sickness journey and then my PhD, I'm now like, I'm still live in the mind sometimes, but my focus is really the body and the body's experience then with nature. And that is only because of that journey that got me there. So yes, many healing modalities. I also saw lots of alternative healers, and there can be wonderful ones. There can also be some charlatans out there and it's scary. When I was really sick, I would have paid anything to be better, to feel better. All I wanted to do is to get back to, quote, get back to my life, meaning show up to my friends and my family and the work that's meaningful to me and in service to the world. And there was a time where I really couldn't do those things in the way I wanted to. But I didn't have endless money, so I couldn't pay for all the healers that I found and all the alternative doctors. But I still got all my blood labs done. I got all the tests. I went to see a colon metaphysical therapist once. She was actually very helpful. And colon therapy can be really powerful for autoimmune just because of the gut-brain connection. And so much of autoimmunity is related to gut.
A question I have is, can you give us a simple definition, because so many people are struggling with autoimmune disorders of all various types, and what is an autoimmune disorder so our listeners can understand better?
Oh, yeah. So it's essentially a category of, quote, diseases in which there are many. You might have heard of rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's or multiple sclerosis. Those are all, quote, autoimmune categorical illnesses, and they're when the body's cells mistakenly recognize each other as threats and start attacking the body itself. So it's not that different than cancer in that way, meaning like cancer, right? It's like the body starting to destroy itself from within. So that was hard for me, really, really hard, because here I am trying to practice self-compassion, and I'm living in a body that's attacking itself. And I couldn't control that. But I would try to speak lovingly to my cells and invite them to, they don't need to do that. It's okay. It's safe here. You don't need I'm not the enemy here. I'm not a threat. Don't attack me. And so what Western medicine would mostly say is there's, medicine you can take to manage some of the symptoms, but fundamentally, once these processes have begun, you can't really reverse them. And you can detect it by these antibodies that exist in the body. And then those antibodies are what start attacking the healthy tissues or cells or glands. So you don't want those antibodies there, right? And then I would track those levels going up and up.
Oh, so you could track the level of antibodies in your system through a blood test or some other test?
A blood test.
Okay.
And then that correlates usually with how sick I would feel.
Pretty evenly, like they would track together?
Yeah, but it's, I'm not getting tests every week, so every quarter or so. But what I would want to say is, I really believe this, these diagnoses are not life sentences. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be. Even a cancer diagnosis. And truly, there might be things that drastically change our day-to-day lives and change what we're capable of and change our focus and bring pain. But if we're alive, I believe there's a trajectory within us that wants to keep living. I trust that deeply. There was a mantra, I wrote it on my phone and I would say it to myself every day. My cells know how to live. My cells are conspiring towards life. And I had to believe that because there was so many moments where I felt angry at myself or betrayed by myself. And that's normal too, to feel like my body is my traitor, or I don't trust my body, or I'm angry at my body. So much is there, which is why nature is so powerful, because that nature can hold all of that complexity. My autoimmune doctor definitely couldn't. I'll say that.
So tell me about how you interfaced with nature and how, let's fast forward to when you started to feel a shift in this autoimmune process.
Yeah, so it started really with me out of total desperation, just spending a lot of time outside. There was one real low point where I was, and you can understand this, having had cluster headaches, which, by the way, I'm so sorry that I'm so glad to hear that you've had some reprieve, but yeah, those are so brutal. Pain in the mind is so specific because there's really no escape. And I burned my hand really bad once, and I was like, oh, this is so much better than when I have headaches, because it's like out here, I can see it externally. When it's in the brain, it's like complete absorption. Yeah, so I had started having these headaches come back in frequency, and migraines are not just a period of head pain. I don't know if cluster headaches are like this too. It's like multiple days on either end of different symptoms. So you have 2 in a week. That's kind of your whole week. And people live like this every day around the world and have to, go to work, show up for their kids, do their lives in an altered state, really. It was a particularly just like really bad window of that. And then I was starting to have sleeping problems. I couldn't sleep through the night. And then the lack of sleep was compounding. And I felt like I was really like losing it. And in a way that I was really scared for myself. I don't think I've ever felt that like close to the brink of like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but my sense of reality, self, everything was getting very hard to like ground into. And the fear and panic and anxiety around the pain that I was experiencing in my body was just completely astronomical and all encompassing and impossible to hold. Or I just wanted to like, scream and yell, but that even hurt to do. So I went into Griffith Park by my house in Los Angeles on, I think at like the peak of this, and I just laid on the ground and it had just rained and I just cried and cried into the earth. And something shifted. The pain just kind of like melted into the earth. It didn't fix anything, but something shifted. And it was my first experience of like, oh my God, something like shifts are available. Shifts are available. And I'm not putting like a value on it of like better or worse or less or more because it's like so subtle. Mm-hmm. But I was able to be with what was happening instead of trying to literally escape out of my skin. And I felt the support of the more than human world, which is so infinite and vast and loving and benevolent. And I needed to feel like I could fall apart and be held in a way that, my friends are so loving, but this was different. This was like falling into the arms of God.
Wow. And so you had this experience in the park, lying on the grass, and you felt yourself and possibly the discomfort just kind of maybe easing into the earth. Can you share more about that? And then maybe transition into what happened after that inspirational moment, that almost a crossroads for you.
Yeah, it really did feel that way. And it gave me this indication that I still had some agency around how I would be experiencing my body and how I'd be experiencing this life, but that it was like connected to the earth somehow. And it also shifted what I was trying to get fixed up until that point. I wanted to get rid of everything that was painful and hard and like go back to whatever I thought I was before that. And the shift was like, oh no, we're not going back. There's no fixing or ending this. There's like going into it, and like I don't know where that's going to go. But that's the only choice now. Like we're going down.
I can feel that. Yeah. So you felt that it was totally perceptible. It was a very profound experience. And what was it like to walk home from that park? And what were your next steps after that with what you experienced? It's almost like that Eckhart Tolle awakening experience on the park bench, for those that may know what that is, but it seems like a really profound awakening experience and a connection to nature. So how did that influence your next steps?
Well, I remember also being one other aspect of this was like not caring that I could be seen. I knew there were people around. I wasn't alone in the woods.
Yes. Oh, so this was in the woods.
No, this wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't.
It was in a park. So
okay. It was in a public park. You were on display, having a deep experience.
Mm-hmm. And just like desperately cry. I don't know. I might have looked like I don't know what people might have thought, but there was this sense of liberation too, of like, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
I know what's happening here, or I don't know, but I'm like sensing something so precious and like a return or a remembering of something in me that had forgotten.
Yeah.
So on the way home,
That's incredible, by the way. You know, many of us live in a space of feeling so concerned about how we look and what other people think. And you had been through so much that you were just like, you know what?
whatever.
This is
Yeah.
me and this is what I'm doing. And it just doesn't matter what anyone thinks about this. What an incredible point to get to.
And I think that has really continued onward and has to, if we're, to be in fidelity to our soul, our healing trajectory. It's not going to fit societal norms. Like, look at society's norm, which is depleting the planet, sick people, not enough resources for people. Like, that's what's normal. So I don't want to be normal. I don't think any of us want to be normal in that sense.
Yes, living a disconnected life is normal in our culture.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's an Aboriginal saying that I came across when I was researching different perspectives of health in other cultures. It says, there is no ability to be well in a sick society.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really difficult. It's like you're swimming way against the stream. It really, I mean, healing and living a holistic life, a connected life, it really takes effort in our culture.
I know. It really does. And I think it's this like beautiful invitation to wake up and wake up more. And the more we see, we can't really unsee, which then the effort comes in, and it's like, oh gosh, it's a lot to be a sensitive being that is willing to feel these things. It's easier to sleepwalk through disconnection. Well, easier until maybe life circumstances come in and knock us over.
You couldn't unsee that experience, unfeel that experience that you had in the park.
Yeah, exactly. And so from that place forward, I started shifting my focus from trying to get better or fix myself to following the thread of whatever had started there that day. That felt so good, so much aliveness, so much holding of many dualities at once. I felt like, ooh, okay, all the like yoga philosophy I've learned and mysticism I've studied, and it's all kind of now crystallizing a little bit into my life experience.
Yeah, like a somatic knowing.
Yeah, yeah. And really a sense too of, oh, okay, then this understanding that the imbalance ripples so much farther beyond my body, and starting to wake up a little bit more to the intersectionality of health, planetary flourishing, race, class, social structures. Like, it all is so deeply interwoven. And so my healing, like, I no longer was interested in Lindsay healing. It was like, what is it for all of us to be better as a collective? And
That's a huge shift from the personal to the collective.
Yeah. And I think that's what the earth is like offering all the time, right? Like, I was talking to a friend the other day about the forest, and they're always sharing their nutrients, and there's no king of the forest. The forest doesn't support king. The forest is the kingdom. Everyone gets to live in the glory of it.
Yeah.
Every animal, every mushroom, every bird. And I'm not saying like a false utopian idea of equality, but individualism has made us very ill on every level. So learning from nature, who still is able to strike symbiosis and balance and enoughness despite a changing planet, I think is very a good teacher for us.
Absolutely. So tell me more about following the thread that was first experienced in the park, and how did your life change? Did it change externally? Was it only changing internally? Both? Like, what happened next?
I had been working on a PhD that I had to pause because I was sick, but my topic was self-compassion and political polarization. And I just realized there's no way I can keep doing that, which had me looking a lot at the psychology of why people are against each other. And I put that fully aside, and this new kind of field of what would it be like to investigate the relationship between humans and nature from an embodied reciprocal place kind of rose. And so I went through a many month process of like letting this old kind of thing die, with like came with it like an old kind of version of myself within this whole other new topic, which meant basically starting my PhD over 2 years in, like new theory, new research plan, new study design, like start over. And I was like, there's only one way I can keep going, and if it's I'm looking at this.
Yes.
And so then I got to interview the most incredible environmental activists who were connected to nature deeply, and their lives were, indicative of that. But I was interviewing them to understand what their personal relationship was like with nature and how that was implicating their collective actions on behalf of nature. The findings from that very much centered around the importance of the body, the senses, reciprocity, intimacy, attachment, how we can heal our attachment injuries with nature. And then the role of collective justice and the importance of a relationship with nature being a commitment to justice on behalf of the collective as well. So that happened, and then I started writing a book and spent like a year really in the Roaring Fork Valley just with the trees, with the forest here, listening and wanting to share my healing journey and also share these trees with others. And so out of that year came this book that comes out next year.
And what's the title of it?
So the book is called Heartwood, The Wisdom and Healing Kinship of Trees. And it's part science, part spirit, part lyricism. And
Part what? What was that last part?
Lyricism, so lyrical
lyricism.
Nonfiction. Yeah,
Okay.
lyrical nonfiction. So it's
Okay.
it's a very different like voice than my PhD,
Okay,
I'm not
yeah.
coming in as the expert, but like a companion on this journey of struggling to understand how to be here and be kin and family with Earth. But through my research, I was able to find some evidence for what I'd experienced in my body. So, for example, there's a lot of studies that have been done on forest bathing and how forest bathing, meaning spending time in a forest mindfully, paying attention, breathing, not on our phones or even in conversation, but like really, really present, can increase natural killer cells in the body, which are important for autoimmunity as well as cancer. So let's just like really feel into that. Spending time in a forest can increase your body's ability to fight off invaders in the body, to heal itself, basically, to like rewire its function back into loving belonging. It also, the phytonuicides that are released from trees improve our hormonal systems, improve our heart rate variability, decrease inflammation, just by being with nature. So now there's like these great physiological things we can point to. So I'm like, okay, people, let's we have the evidence, but feel it for yourself, right?
So Lindsay, I want to know your experience. I want to know back to that time in the park. Yes, it changed your field of study and you began to research it. But I'm so interested in like your felt lived experience of evolution that occurred. Like, what did you do to support and nurture this experience that you were having?
I mean, I really had to leave Los Angeles pretty much during that time and come live in Colorado so that I was able to be outside a lot and spend hours. And this is a huge privilege. Not everyone has the opportunity to do that and make that kind of a drastic shift in their life. I was able to, and my PhD studies allowed me that flexibility to kind of restructure my entire day-to-day so that I was starting to attune and listen to nature every day and have these experiences repeatedly. They changed and shifted, but as soon as I started really opening to this language of the earth, the language of the senses, our bodies, conversations really just started flowing all the time.
Within you, between you and nature?
Yeah, between me and nature.
Was it a mental or more of a somatic communication?
It's kind of both. There's a family of aspen trees here that I started visiting and then have returned to throughout the last 5 years. But when I stand in front of them, I feel like they really chose me. I mean, I was on winter walks, hours every day, winter walks, just gorgeous silence, absolutely impeccable stillness, and have passed many trees. But for some reason, these trees seemed like they wanted me to stop and pause. And I did. And there was just this really deep sense of recognition that started happening. And I noticed it in my body because I felt a little bit more easeful or a little excited or some joy come in. But it's also, there's some mental component, but I try not to put a narrative there because it's easy for my mind to introduce that and tell a story. I'm like, oh, the tree is saying this. And I'm like, I think I'm just making that up, overlaying what I want the tree to say.
Sure.
But if I stay just really at that level of sensation and quietness, I can start tracking the sensations. And then that is what feels like a conversation. I'm sensing tightness or pleasure move in certain directions through the body as I'm maybe I'm touching, there's a baby aspen that's part of this little group. So maybe I'm touching the baby aspen's hand and there's a sense, I usually get messages. So less a back and forth dialogue, but more we have been here for a very long time and we really appreciate you coming to see us.
Wow.
It's important for us that humans pause and recognize us, for example, but just really sitting with a message like that, it can change your life.
Wow.
So then I get motivated, right? Then I want to go out and see my trees and hear what they have to say and be a part of this thing that's happening that I don't even understand. And sure, we could talk about the science, but it's who cares at a certain level, right?
No, the science is good. I mean, a lot of people appreciate the science, but it's just so interesting to hear your felt experience and this relationship and this, it's there's a mindfulness meditative component to it. There's a somatic component. There's relationship. There's mutual respect. It's really beautiful. And so you moved to Colorado and you started spending more time in nature. And then how did you experience your health changing through this experience over, what was it, months?
It was not an immediate thing, but yeah, it was I would say a year of progressively feeling better. And that was deeply companioned by these experiences with the trees and this sense of really being seen and known in a way that I hadn't ever felt with a human being. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's true. And that connects to the attachment Peace, but a secure relationship is a predictor for all kinds of outcomes, health outcomes, life satisfaction. But we can have that sort of safe and secure, safe haven, safe harbor feeling with a place in nature. And I really think it needs to be a place, not all wider nature. You know, how can we are humans, we have faces. I think that we can recognize beings with faces. That can be a helpful, like, place to begin. And the aspen trees have faces, and there are eyes on them,
Yeah,
and
that's
there are
right. Yeah, that's right.
really clear faces. The sound of the aspen leaves in the wind is a sound that it doesn't exist in any other
It's magic.
place. Yeah, it's magic.
Yeah.
So they're speaking. But I remember early on, as I was opening to this wider form of awareness, it actually started feeling a little intimidating at first. Like, ooh, I'm being seen. Like, do I want to be seen? What are they going to see? Which is like the same things I would think with a human that's getting to know me. And so I was just tracking, like, wow, this is wild. Like, I'm feeling nervous, being exposed because
Yeah.
this tree is going to see me, but I want to be seen. And I'm kind of like really drawn to that experience because it seems mystical and strange, but in a way I like.
Does your book Heartwood go into this? Is that what you're going to be really sharing in this book, this relationship?
Yes. So there's a lot of stories about this particular aspen family and yeah, how I got sick and how nature helped me heal, but healing as an ecological ongoing endeavor that is connected to the collective. And oh, right, to answer your question, about a year in, I just started feeling a lot more energy come back. My symptoms were reducing. My headache frequency was going down. A lot of vitality returning. And I mean, honestly, it felt like a miracle. It really did. I had been coming to terms with this might just be my life now. And if that's my life, I'm not going to reject it because this is the only one I have. I would rather it be different. But I will be in this and I will love, regardless. And it felt like just a mercy that things started to change. And I would tell the trees about what I was scared of and how hard it felt to live in this body and how angry I felt sometimes and how alone and how confused and how much I still wanted to do in my life and would that be possible? And sometimes I'd even feel like, ooh, am I trauma dumping on nature? And then I felt like part of that reciprocity then was like, let me listen to what their pain is. And so then starting to really tune into the trees sharing that they're sad that humans don't pay attention to them, that on this particular place there's a road there. So in the summer there's cars that whiz by all the time and don't notice them. There's a sense of course, the forest is all connected to each other and forests are under threat and logging and deforestation is happening around the world. And so I felt them very clearly saying, you need to advocate for the rest of us. We don't have human voices. So we're speaking to you, but like you can speak to other humans and not in some white savior way of like, let me go save the trees. A real clear way of, I think it's part of my dharma or my commitment on earth to share their desire to persevere because guess what? We need them to even breathe. They change carbon dioxide into oxygen for us. They are our lungs of the planet. So it's not like they just want to exist because they're pretty and a reverent form of life, so we should respect them. They're also deeply biologically tied to our survival. And it's easy to forget that just moving through our modern life.
I'm so grateful that you're an advocate for the natural world. It's such a powerful position that you're in terms of having this healing that kind of inspires the passion to do the work. It's like you're an advocate from the inside, which is really beautiful. There's a couple of topics I want to hit on before we wrap up this conversation. One is Can you share a little bit? I know at True Nature, you're going to be teaching there about psychedelics. And so can you share about this workshop and tell me about your experience with psychedelics and what you've learned and anything you might want to share about them?
Yeah. And I wanted to add as well just the healing story because I think it is important and it's something to celebrate. But I've recently tested negative for my autoimmune condition
Oh,
and the antibodies are gone.
mm,
So,
congratulations. That's
and
huge.
I say that because I think I want people to have a sense of hope that things really can change. I
Hmm.
also hold this wide view of healing as it's okay if that isn't the story. And we can still feel better though and live our lives more fully, even if the numbers are, not in our favor.
Thank you.
Yeah. So psychedelics, I'm so excited to come to True Nature. I just think it's the most magical place and so much heart and soul and love there and reverence. So thrilled. And I think I'll be doing something more around erotic ecology and nature and healing later in August.
Oh, you're going to do a couple of events.
Yeah, yeah. So if this is something you want to explore more, I hope there'll be an opportunity for that. With psychedelics, so Colorado recently legalized psilocybin
Hmm.
for psychedelic assisted therapy and healing. And very soon there will be healing centers opening so people can access this modality. And I have been working in this world for about 6 years as a researcher, as a psychedelic facilitator at a legal center in the Netherlands, and most recently at UC Berkeley in the Psychedelic Center for the Science of Psychedelics. So coming from it from multiple perspectives, I really wanted to give like kind of a 101 in a way of psychedelics beyond the hype. So for people that have lots of experience and want to understand more how this would be used in a more like formal healing capacity and what to think through or expect or like what questions might be good to ask, kind of the ethical considerations. It could meet you there. And then also for those that are pretty new to this and would like to understand what the science says. So I'll be walking us through like an overview of what the last like 20 years of science around psychedelics for mental health, addiction, chronic health, all kinds of outcomes, and how they work in the brain too. So we'll kind of get a little bit mental. And then I want to offer like a bit of a practice, an embodied practice that
Mm,
the types of things that you could expect in a psychedelic healing container and
beautiful.
leave time for questions.
Wow, that's so great. So when is that happening?
So that's July 11th next week.
Great. 2025, in case somebody in the future is listening to this.
Yes.
Awesome. You know, it's really interesting because I've recently, over the last 3+ years, done kind of a deep dive into psychedelics, variety, and have gained so much from the experience. It's really expanded my perception. I've released a lot of karma and really been inspired and learned so much. I've also learned through the integration process that it's not a magic pill. I also have not used it recreationally. It's been very therapeutic. And it's like for me personally on my healing journey, I really needed support from all walks of life. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I was very, I would guess, say even anti psychedelics for most of my life.
Hmm.
I'm trained in clinical psychology and Native American spirituality and yoga philosophy and like kind of a purist. And as I moved down to Costa Rica, I began to open my heart and my mind to the fact
Hmm.
that, you know what, nature
Hmm.
has some support potentially here for
Hmm.
me. And so I'm really grateful that we're bringing you, that you're coming to True Nature in Carbondale to begin to open this really important topic on the
Hmm.
therapeutic use
Hmm.
of plant medicines and psilocybin and such. So
Hmm.
thank you very much. Anything else you want to share about that?
Yeah, I really appreciate everything you just said, and very important to keep in mind. My view for sure is that they are not for everyone. certainly, and require a lot of discernment and approaching them with reverence and to understand the preparation, therapeutic session, and integration, and why all of that really matters. And I'm a little worried that with the legalization, it'll start seeming like, oh, great, I'll just take them and, by myself. And that could be fine and supportive. I'm not being prescriptive, but used with the right set and setting, they can be absolutely transformative allies. And they can also be destabilizing for some. And so it's important to understand all of that as one considers it. But they certainly have been powerful in my life and changed my trajectory, I think, towards nature ultimately, even though that's not what I thought I was having a therapeutic session with psilocybin around. But I do think these plants often leave people with lessons around unity and love and care and compassion for the wider planet. I don't think that's an accident. You can trace the repetition of those types of mystical experiences throughout culture and across the plant medicines. So
I've had some very deep experiences on all varieties of psychedelics. I've really done a deep dive and life-changing. The releases and the connections and the perceptual shifts and the understandings. But one of the most important things that I've learned is the integration process of how we take what we learn through the use of these powerful, wise spiritual medicines. And like all epiphanies and deep spiritual experiences, it's like how we apply what we've learned to our day-to-day life, for me, has been where the rubber meets the road. It's not cultivating more dependence on something, but using it as an ally to then inform me of how I can live a better, more holistic, more connected life. So as an advocate for plant medicines and psychedelics, I really have done a 180-degree shift, and I am such an advocate for the conscious use of these sacred gifts from Mother Earth.
So beautifully said. Yes. There's a quote from Piaget who says, moving from a state experience to a stage of development. And what you're pointing to with that integration of those lessons into meaningful changes in our life is the goal, right? So thank you for highlighting. That's so beautiful.
So as we close, is there anything else that you would like to share? Are there any links that you want us to provide? We can certainly add those to the show notes. How can people get in touch with you? Anything else that you would like to share? Oh, and also, since you mentioned the word erotic ecology, and I know you're going to be speaking about that at True Nature, and I have a sense, but I think our listeners might want to know of what's the definition of that?
Yes. So erotic ecology is the practice of connection with nature as an erotic pathway. So really, really deepening our sense of aliveness with ourselves and with the natural world, and allowing that to open to what feels good, what's pleasurable. What feels good is not something to shun or be scared of. It's actually our very important evidence of what is the link to our flourishing. And Andreas Weber wrote, he's a kind of ecological philosopher, and he says, love is an ecological process. So erotic ecology is it's kind of a practice, it's a philosophy, and it's a set of like rituals and embodiment practices that can deepen our sense of aliveness here and everywhere.
Beautiful. I'm so grateful that you're going to bring that to True Nature as well.
I know it's kind of complicated sounding, but
No, from the story that you shared about your healing, I mean, God, that's so much, it's really about relationship and intimacy
yeah,
and
it really
connection,
is.
you
It
know?
is. It is.
So,
And like eco-erotic love affairs, like the earth is our lover. Earth can be our
mm,
lover. You know, it doesn't have to be like the benevolent parent or mother nature. Of course, it's beautiful, but what if the earth was your lover? How might you interact with nature from that place?
beautiful. How can people get in
Oh, yeah.
touch with you and learn more about you and what you're doing?
So you can come to my website, lindsaybranham.com. There's links on there if you want to explore working with me, eco-dula capacity, also in psychedelic integration. For now, I will be, I'm about to be certified in Colorado, so as a psychedelic facilitator, but for now, integration. And my book, please follow it when it comes out next year. And I have a Substack where I write regularly on these topics. And that's for free. Welcome to sign up for that. lindsaybranham.substack.com. And if you are in the Valley, I'm now a columnist at the Aspen Times, and I'm
All
writing
right.
like every other week, but about environmental topics connected to the Valley. And I'll be weaving in some of the things we've been talking about in this conversation.
Spell your name for us, just for those who are listening.
LindsayBranham. And I'm
Great.
on Instagram too, but
Perfect.
Lindsay Loren on Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. Any parting words?
I'm sitting with a heavy heart just with the turmoil happening in our country and in all places. And I love the poet Mary Oliver. And she talks a lot about kindness and being open to letting the waterfall of the sun find you. So my closing words would be, what would it look like to let the waterfall of the sun find you today?
Beautiful. I'll contemplate that.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Eaden.
Lindsay.
This has been wonderful. Appreciate you
I
in this
appreciate you
conversation.
too. And I look forward to your interactions at True Nature. And I know Megan and the community is super excited to welcome you. So
I'm
thank you.
so excited. And when are you're not coming back soon, are you?
I'm going to be
To
down in
meet you in
Costa Rica
person.
for a few more months, but I
Okay.
loved my time at True Nature last week. It was really beautiful. So
Oh,
we'll keep in touch.
okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you so
Bye.
much. All
Thank
right. Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on Connection is the Medicine podcast, a podcast dedicated to the connection to our deeper selves, to nature, to each other in community and spirit. You can find out more about Connection is the Medicine at our website. We have a foundation, and we'd appreciate your support and your participation, both at True Nature in Carbondale, Colorado, but also Loma Sagrada in Garza and Nosara, Costa Rica. So you can just find us at connectionisthemedicine.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you a beautiful day. And please, let's visit again, maybe in nature. Take care. Peace.